always understand where the negotiation may or may not go and be prepared to leave something on the table, right? Don't be like me with two businesses that are decreasing in value, or we don't take an offer because we think we can get X, Y, Z, or any of those sort of lines, right? So it's important to understand your value, understand where the driver is for the purchaser, and then leave something for the purchaser then to be able to get a quick win.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur Organisation Business Podcast. I'm your host, Linh Podetti. My guest today is Rohan Wood, also known as the EXITguy, specialising in helping business owners sell their businesses the right way. Rohan was a member of EO Queensland for many years and have continued to contribute to the community through his speaking and workshops. Now, in this episode, Rohan shared lessons learned from acquiring and selling multiple businesses over his career. He also let us in on one of his memorable challenges where he was faced with selling off part of a large franchise business that he built, which caused him to be dragged back into managing the business. Well, we're all going to eventually need to exit our business one day, so this episode is one not to be missed if we want to discover how to get our business exit ready. So without further ado, let's welcome Rohan. Well, welcome, Rohan. It's so good to have you on this podcast. How are you?
Well, it's great to see you too, Lynn. It's exciting to be here. It's EO is something that's very passionate with me, and anything I can do to add some value, I love.
Yeah, it was a privilege for me to attend one of your workshops as well when I was in Queensland last year. So yeah, it was so engaging. I learned a lot and I was able to share that information to my husband as well. Now, before we get started talking about the whole acquisition, merger and selling of the business, etc., I would love to know how you got started into this whole kind of, you call yourself the EXITguy. How did that come about?
Well, I am the EXITguy, and I think that's a really exciting part of evolution of entrepreneurship for me, right? So, buying, building, and selling businesses. Which basically, after being a director of PricewaterhouseCoopers, I always knew I had to drive my own bus by the time I was 34. So, I jumped off their partnership program. Everyone thought I was crazy, and started down this venture of my own, driving my own bus, as I call it, and I was about 32. And since then, I've bought, built, and sold 9 businesses during basically a 15 or 18-year time frame. So it's just been a wild journey. It's been out of control.
So what is it about exiting that you love so much?
Yeah, I really love education, right? And educating yourself and being the best person you can be, right? So I was actually involved in building about 36 townhouses, because whilst I had my businesses are selling businesses, and that created wealth. Where I put that wealth was basically into property, right? So I had a really quite a large project underway and a few other things, and I've always wanted to do an MBA, right? And it was a toss-up between doing an MBA and going and doing a whole heap of global EO conferences, right? Universities. Right? Anyway, I decided to go to Bond University. And I suppose some of the triggers there, and not that I would recommend doing an MBA or any of those sort of things. It was just an itch I had to scratch, right? And I suppose during that time, and it was relatively, we're doing a strategy session. I saw this Adidas curve, and what it did was educate me in the lifestyle cycles of business, right? But more importantly, where I added value, right? And there's these two massive stages in business where businesses fail, and the first one is in startup. Everyone knows that story, right? And the second one is when they've hit a glass ceiling, or the entrepreneurs or founders trap, where they just can't grow beyond themselves, right? And for me, that was a bit of a light bulb moment because of two things. I used to get frustrated because I just buy, build, and sell businesses, right? And I used to look at my cohorts, and they had these businesses and legacies and everything else, but I was just buying, building, and selling, right? So I didn't really understand why I was attracted to that. And then the second thing is why I was attracted to certain businesses or business owners to take over their business, right? And it was because they'd reached this glass ceiling. And then, to cut a long story short, every business I bought, built, sold, or acquired, or took a major shareholding in, right, it was exactly the same process. Right? And I suppose that was really how it evolved into, getting back into doing merger and acquisition. Right. And it was either a decision after coming out of that MBA and sort of thinking, oh, well, do I go and buy another business, right, and rinse and repeat? Or do I actually, do some merger and acquisition work? And there was such a big demand for this service, right? Because in effect, there's a large percentage of, 72% of businesses just don't sell. Right. So if you list your business tomorrow with a broker, it probably won't sell because it's not set up or it's not attractive enough. Right. Then 52% of all business owners rely on the sale of their business to fund their retirement plan, yet less than 78% just don't even have an exit plan. All right. So it's just, there was an awakening of, shit, here's a process that I do and it's been really successful for me, right? I can teach it, right? And there's a need for it. So that's how the EXITguy came about, really.
Yeah, I love it. And so can you tell me more about, you've gone through so many businesses. What were some of the horror stories or war stories or challenges that you could share with the audience today?
So personally, I never went into a business without having a sort of exit, right? And it's important for me anyway. That was my outlook, right? This is a vehicle. I'm going to invest my time. I'm going to invest my money, and I want a good outcome at the end, right? So that was effectively a part of my ethos of acquiring businesses myself. So that was by far my first mentality. The second mentality, or the second ownership or learning that I had was that usually gets someone else involved in the sale of the business, right? Because it devoids you of, or it just gives you a way to breathe, right? And emotionally dispatches you from a sale, right? Which is really good. And I suppose there was one really good example. The other thing that the foundation of the EXITguy is that I work with established business owners that are feeling frustrated and trapped. And that came about by, I was involved in setting up a franchise group. I had 5 of those franchises myself. We built it up to about 114 franchisees. I had a fit-out company as well. I had about 67 people plus working for me. I had a good structure in place. And my exit plan at that time was just to sell them off one by one. So they're all in their own separate little companies, etc., with a co-joined sort of directorship and management structure. Now, I suppose one of the things that I didn't realise was the most attractive ones will go first, right? And then usually, of the 5, there was probably 1 or 2 that were slow moving, right? They were all in my buildings and everything else. So I had flexibility on rent and lease terms and these sort of things. But I got basically stuck with 2. Now, 2 of these businesses wouldn't support the management structure, so I had to retrench and go, and I got dragged back into the business. And for me, it was frustrating, and I felt trapped. And it was probably the longest sort of 12 or 14 or 18 months of my life that I just had this weight of, I didn't really want to be on the tools. I didn't really want to be, in hospitality, which, I didn't want to be fronting up there and doing this And that weight of frustration and that weight of being trapped and not having choice for me was such a big learning. And that's in a part of the ethos of the EXITguy as well, right? Yeah.
Oh, I can just imagine how frustrating it'd be for you who love freedom, and then all of a sudden you're stuck in it. So what did you learn from that experience? Like, what can we gain from the insights that you've gone through?
Well, I love what Mike Tyson says. He says, everyone's got a plan until they get a punch to the head, right? And but the first thing is to have a plan, all right? Now, the actual plan that with that group alone, right, was a pretty sound plan, right? It was a rising tide market. They were going gangbusters. It got sold to a publicly listed company. and it just, there was a clash of values, right, between the new listed company, right, and myself, right, and because by that stage I divested out of the main business, and I just had these businesses. So and then the exit strategy of actually selling a one by one was quite sound. However, right, all well planned plans, don't go to necessarily. And the market changed. There was a few other things that happened, and there was rumblings, and it just made the businesses at the time of disposal a little bit less flexible to sell. Right, so that's a big learning, really. So firstly, always have a plan, but be flexible enough to be able to change and be fluid enough to run with that plan to get the exit you need.
Yeah. And so why did it take so long for you to be stuck in there? It was like 14 months. How could you have got yourself out earlier?
Look, and that's probably a really good learning as well. Like, regardless of what you think your business is valued at, the market will tell you what it's valued at. Right now, I already had transactional history, right? That I was transacting these businesses at a certain multiple, and and I knew their attractiveness. I knew where they were, and therefore, I really sort of thought that these businesses were valued at X, Y, Z, right? So look, and I was offered those and knocked them back, right? So it was a really key learning at that stage was, whilst I'm registered and I'm a valuer, and I've got a valuation certificate and all those other good things, and the bond medal, the university medal from Bond, with regard to valuation techniques and all that sort of other palaver, and I can give you a good range of valuation. The ultimate market, the ultimate value will be driven from the market. So I was probably overstating the value at that time. I probably could have got out earlier, but look, I did it, right? And then I held on to a little bit longer. And then I was worse. Make it worse for me, I was trapped in the business, right? Rather than working on the business, I was actually in the business, in the trenches, working, right? And that was very interesting. So I could have disposed of it well. I didn't. I held a little bit longer and suffered the consequence. Lucky I knew the landlord.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes things are outside of our control. The economy, whatever's happening in the world. And other people's choices. Yeah, like you said, you can only, it's whatever they want to pay. So talking about exit, I've always heard the argument around like you should always have an exit plan. Everyone should have an exit plan. What is your take on that? Like, I don't have an exit plan. And is it true that everyone needs to think about an exit plan?
I think there's an old saying, is guaranteed you'll exit your business. Right,
you're gonna die, right? We're all gonna die eventually. Yes,
I think you heard me say that one. I think you're guaranteed you will exit your business. Right? The reality of it is, it's for me, it's about educating yourself so you can get the best exit, so you can maximize your exit. Right, so that's where I'm at, right? And it's a combination of fact and story, and it's being able to put those facts and story to the marketplace, and being, as a business owner, understanding the drivers of your business that's attractive to others. And that's not only on your exit, but it's also attracting really good quality employees as well, right? There was one of the businesses I was involved in was we built one of the largest privately owned commercial real estate companies in Brisbane. And we were attracting some really good talent from some of the major multinational real estate agents, commercial industrial real estate agents, purely on our vision, right? Purely on vision, where we were taking the company and those sort of things. And it was attractive to us, right? So we didn't have to pay $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 sign-on bonuses or anything of those sort of lines. We were able to attract the quality team we had, right? Purely because we knew why our business was attractive, right? And if it's attractive to you, it's going to be attractive to others, right? So I think you should have an exit plan, most certainly, right? And certainly by the time you come to exit, don't leave it too early right? Because it takes time, it takes effort, right? And certainly if you want to maximise it, anyone can sell a shitty car, right? I can put a market, can sell a shitty car tomorrow, or you can sell a car for less than its value, or any of those lines. But if you want to maximise your value, you've got to put the time and effort into it, right? And I think that's the key, right?
Yeah. So in terms of exit plan, what questions do I need to ask myself in order to start developing that or to make it valuable?
Well, the first thing is, and I've seen this trap time and time again, you've got to get a good understanding of where the value is in the business, but what value you're going to put at the business on. Now, I think when we're starting up a business, right, we're excited, we've got a huge amount of energy, we've got a huge amount of ideas, we all throw out all our resources, we risk our house, it costs our marriage, we do this, we do that, right, and we've got all this energy into our startup, right? But when it comes to exit, right, we don't often think about those, right? And it is so vitally important that we exit like we start, right? By the time we get to exit, we're shitty, we're tired, we're frustrated, we're feeling trapped, right? And we just want to get out. So I see time and time again business owners that won't seek the right advice, right? Or they don't get a good, true indication of the value of their business or how it's attractive to others, right? And that for me is an absolute starting point, right? Get someone, and I don't necessarily mean your accountant, right? Your accountants are great at accounting, they're great at compliance, they're great at tax, but they're not necessarily great at valuing businesses, right? Because they'll focus too much on the fact, but they'll leave the story out. And I find 9 times out of 10, your business will transact because you've got a great story and you enroll others into that story. And then the facts support that story, right? So the first point is really get a really strong handle on the value and how that value is created and being able to represent that value to a potential purchaser that they can understand it, right? That, there's often that saying we have 3 sets of books, right? So we have a tax book, right? We have our personal books, right? But then the business has a books as well, right? So we've got to pair it back to what exactly is that asset returning you, right, as the business owner, and what risks moving forward, or how can we guarantee that income moving forward for the new purchaser? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it sounds as almost it's a pitch deck. So if you were trying to get investors in, you would obviously want to have a pitch deck to say how great your business is for people to invest, or it is to sell the business, right? Yeah. And so in terms of what would it make it valuable? Is it the length of time you've been in business? Is it the revenue size, the profit? What is, the top 3 things that people look at?
Yep. Okay. So we get a valuation and then we get a potential valuation, right? So your current valuation, and that's really the dynamics. I look at businesses initially on a fact basis. What's their growth rate? What's their turnover? Right. So then the 2 little paradigms, right? And for me, being attracted in the marketplace, they've got to be double digit in both, right? If not, there must be a good story behind it, right? So that's the first thing. The other thing I see quite regularly and decreases the attractiveness is what we call a small business discount, right? So there's a small business discount, and if you look at you look at businesses on a stock exchange, for example, and you look at their PE ratios, their price per earnings ratios and everything else, there are multiples of 15 or 18 or 12 or any of those sort of lines, right? Mm-hmm. But that's because they've got the size, the structure, and their earnings are pretty well guaranteed into the future, right? Unless there's a global financial crisis or there's COVID or there's something big happens and impacts that income stream moving forward. On the flip side of that is small business, right? And small business, you got a small business discount because it's either heavily reliant on you as the owner, right? Well, that's massively discounted, right? Or it's small in nature, or it can be impacted by size. So the guaranteed future earnings of that business is not as guaranteed, right? So there's what they call a small business discount. Right? Mm-hmm.
And what is that discount? Is that like 50% off or 30% off? Like, what is that usually?
Look, a lot of people say, they ring me up and say, Rohan, look, can you, here's what I'm doing. Here's my figures. What do you think the valuation is? I can't say. Right. And I really can't say, because that fact and story, right, when they come together, and you look like a Venn diagram, so that overlapping circle is where your intrinsic value lies, right? So it's a combination of your facts and stories, right? Really is. It's astounding, right? So people, and I think this is, for me, the big differentiator of, like, brokers will put a value on the business and they'll get out and market it and they'll tell everyone what the value of the business is. Whereas for me, I work with the clients and don't actually tell the prospective buyer what the value of the business is, because who am I to say, here's the value of the business? Because they could be looking, and they always look at the business through a totally different lens. There may be a strategic imperative. There may be a product that you have. There may be a database that you have. There may be something intrinsic that you don't value as the business owner, but they're valuing very highly, right? And that allows us to optimize our exit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense, because it's like sometimes a property could go for so much because developers wanted to use that to build apartments instead of a normal house. Right. It could be a lot more. It's a strategic reason.
And exactly. And if you're an uneducated buyer, even in the same street, right, you'll think, I can't, that crappy building down the back there went for 800,000, blah, 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 not realising that actually the land value alone was probably priced at 1.6 million.
Yeah.
And that is a really good analogy. I'm really glad you brought it up, because it is so true.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
A big part of it. And the first stage is this alignment process, where a lot of it is education, because the more confident you are as a business owner when you're selling your property or you're selling your business, right, naturally the higher price you'll get. If that makes sense. Right? Yeah. If you're educated, if you're educated about that block, right, and you say, oh, geez, that developer really picked that up really cheaply at $800,000, right, because I know that's a 4-story, it's zoned, A or B res, and there's no easements and this and that and everything else. I think that was really cheap. I should have bought it myself, right? And if you're educated and you're confident, you can, when we're in negotiations and everything else, you're coming from a lot stronger position.
Yeah, really cool. So when I was at your workshop, I learned a few key things. For example, reduce the number of earn out period, because the longer the earn out, the more chance of it going wrong or you being stuck in there. What are the other tips or kind of like quick key takeaways you could give us, considering you've sold lots of businesses, you've helped a lot of businesses to sell as well? What are kind of the things to avoid and things to think about when it comes to...
Look, I'll give you an example of a great mate of mine. He's still a mate of mine, but he was an EO member. Basically, he tapped me on the shoulder and said, Rohan, I want to get out of the business, and I'm happy to sell it for stock, right? And I said, whoa, look, right, let's have a quick look, right? So, look, we went through an alignment and did a few things, but before I even got there, I said, Mark, I could probably get you an extra $1 to $1.5 million as well as your stock, right? And here's the reasons why and things, right? And which was obviously, because, regardless of who we are, we want to exit, right? And put those funds towards our retirement, our superannuation, or any of those sort of ones. So here was a classic of someone coming in, undervaluing the business, not understanding where the value was, and we present the value. Now, however, during the negotiation and everything else, we found a buyer. It was exactly where I said it would land, plus stock and value, which was fantastic. Rounded it all up, and then and it was a cash sale. So whenever we can negotiate a cash sale where you don't have to vendor finance or you don't have to part finance, right, it decreases your risk, right? So that's rule number one. Now, invariably, there will be times where you do have to vendor finance or you do have to do an earn-out or any of those sort of ones, but I tried to minimise those. And so if it's a long earn-out, well, because you're de-risking effectively the sale and the handover, well, then therefore the price should be higher, right? But I would discount the price and get a shorter earnout, right, rather than having a higher and having a longer earnout or vendor finance or any of those sort of lines. So it says cash is king, right? So that's one of the things. The other thing is, I always encourage, always leave something on the table, right? Always understand where the negotiation may or may not go, and be prepared to leave something on the table, right? Don't be like me, get stuck with two businesses that are decreasing in value, or we don't take an offer because we think we can get X, Y, Z, or any of those sort of lines, right? So it's important to understand your value, understand where the driver is of the purchaser, and then leave something for the purchaser then to be able to get a quick win or those sort of things, and go from there.
Okay. Yeah.
Your structure, your legal structure, how they negotiate, all those sort of things are absolutely critical. And it may be buy out your business partner first, clean up your structure, make sure it's nice and clean. Invariably businesses around the EO size, EO member size will be an asset-based transaction rather than a share sale. So it starts getting quite complex.
Yeah. So when you talk about negotiation, who actually does the negotiation? Would it be someone like yourself when we engage you, or is it the business owner, or is it the broker?
Yep. Well, so a broker or myself or any of those lines can negotiate on your behalf, right? And there are, and look, merger and acquisition means buyer or seller, right? So there are times where I can actually work for the buyer, and that's great fun as well. Now, there are tips and tricks about negotiation and how to negotiate and when to negotiate, when to be silent, and I can confidently say, right, that the person who knows and understands how that game is played will win, right? And it is a game in a way, right? But as business owners, we're great business owners. We're not necessarily great negotiators or business sellers, right? Now, it's a really important differentiation, right? If I need brain surgery, I'm not going to go to my best mate down the pub, right? That's the reality. So for me, and even I transact property a lot. I always use an agent, right? Why? Because that's what they're paid for. I not necessarily might know that market 100%, or I might necessarily have the right buyers or any of those sort of lines. So yes, cut a long story short, EO members will engage me to negotiate on their behalf, and they give me what they call an authority to act, right? So be able to present their business, be able to negotiate on their behalf, but I involve my clients 100% all the way through the journey, so they're fully comfortable all the way through.
Gotcha. All right. So let's move on to a little bit about your personal side. I know you do a lot of boat racing or something like that. So now that you've been in business for so long, how are you living your life? How has business been able to support your lifestyle?
Well, for me, it comes back to choice, right? And I love yachting. Luckily, I recognised and was Queensland Yachtsman of the Year and a few other things, and I race competitively. It's a great sport. It's a very time consuming sport. It's like having a side business that is continually running at a loss, right? So it's purely a passion driven sport, and I suppose I couldn't do that sort of sport without having choice in my business and choice in my lifestyle and understanding wife and understanding family. But they're all drivers, and I think that comes down to being flexible and leveraged enough to be able to have choice, right? If I want to go out for a sale, I know that I can schedule it, right? If I know the Sydney Hobart's coming up, I know all the racing and everything else, I can schedule that into my calendar and have flexibility while not being massively detrimental to my business interests. My property business is just going from strength to strength, right? But I'm pretty leveraged out of it. And my work week really look like, 2 or 3 days with a client on merger and acquisition work, and then I've got 2 or 3 days effectively doing property and property related work. And somewhere in the middle, I try to go out for a sale every week as well. And it just allows flexibility. And I think that comes back to feeling trapped and frustrated. That's the worst state I can be in. You take away that choice for me, and that really really frustrates me.
So considering you've been in business for a long time, you probably met a lot of business owners who follow at the end of their business time. What have you learned now about happiness? Like, what does it mean to achieve happiness as an entrepreneur?
Look, it's a little bit like, what's the definition of success, right? So it's going to be different for everyone, right? But for me, happy wife's a happy life, right? Of course, right? but driving, for me, having the ability to do what I want when I want, right? I think for me is a measure of success, right? I mightn't drive the flashiest car in the world. I mightn't have the flashiest boat in the world. I mightn't have the flashiest house or anything those lines. But the reality is, I'm fortunate enough, and I've built enough, and I've seen enough to be able to do what I want when I want, right? And I've retired a couple of times, and all those sort of things, right? So, what's the definition of happiness for me? I think being able to get up in the morning, or the night before, and be able to drive your own bus. That's certainly, for me, that's a big thing.
Yeah. So what got you to become more balanced in your life? Like, you sound like you realized, well, I don't need the flashiest car, I don't need the flashiest thing, but I want that time, freedom. And it sounded like it's like a more of a balanced life. So what made you to, pursue that?
Well, I left home when I was 14 or 15, right? So, which forces you into entrepreneurship. I think that's, but my work ethic was unbelievable. Like I was out of balance because I didn't have security. I didn't have security of money, right? And so that driver, was big, right? Get security of money, right? And get security of life, be able to feed yourself, be able to put yourself through school, be able to put yourself through uni, blah, blah, blah. And I suppose that all came to a heap. We talk about PricewaterhouseCoopers and being a director and on their partnership program. And I remember coming home to my then wife and saying, "Oh, great, listen, become a partner, and we're going to go down to Sydney and everything else." She looked at me and said, "Oh, I'm sure you really enjoy that, right?" Like, as me personally, right? Yeah. So the right on the wall, and the reality of it is that caused the divorce, right? Because I was so out of balance, I was so driven, right? And the reality is that caused a divorce, and it was probably the best thing, and probably the worst thing that's ever happened, right? In a lot of ways. What it did is allowed me to get off that merry-go-round and to be able to sell. So it certainly did it from that perspective. The other thing that allowed me to do was learn about accountability, ownership, and responsibility. Whilst, I blamed my wife for this, or I made excuses for me working all million miles an hour and hundreds of hours and everything else, or I didn't take ownership of everything along those lines. It wasn't until I started looking at accountability, ownership, and responsibility of myself and my own actions that really my life turned around, and I was able to become the partner and dad I am now.
I love that message because I too, even though I don't look old yet, but I think I've already come to that realization about the importance of other parts of your life. It's not all about work. It's not all about money. It's about spending time, quality time. And this leads me to the last question as well. Like, what do you want the world to remember for? Because at the end of the day, we're all on this earth temporarily. We want to do something, impactful. What is it for you?
Yeah. Well, for me and my perspective, it's a really interesting question, right? Because it gets you thinking, right? Be a legacy, right? Or is it going to be my time with EO? Or is it going to be all these sort of things, right? And I'm lucky because I've had every award in EO. I've had every values award. I've been recognised there. I've been recognised in my sailing. I've been recognised by my cohorts, those sort of things, and it's been really good. Right? And I thought, a big part of my values is what I say is what I do. So my world is my world, right? So that's my behavioural sort of side of it. But I suppose it really boils down to that if I'm basically an adventurer and a journeyman, right? If you really narrow it down, I buy and sell businesses, I buy and sell property, I take adventures on the high sea, so I'm an adventurer and a journeyman. And then I think combined with that to encourage others to have choice, right? Mm-hmm. Have choice, right? And that's, to be able to give choice to myself, to be able to get up in the morning and have the ability to choose, to give choice to my family, right? And my kids. Do you want to go to uni? Do you not want to go to uni? Right? Do you want to buy a house? Do you not want to buy a house? Mm-hmm. Right? And give choice to my clients, right? Do we want to sell now? Do we want to sell later? Do we want to take this deal? Do we want to wait? It's all choice. And I think it reflected on it before. I think, so to summarize, I think, journeyman and an adventurer, that gives other people choice, because as soon as you take choice and you choose something, by default, you have to take ownership, accountability, and responsibility for that choice. You can't blame anyone else, right? Or you can't make excuses, right? Or you can't be in denial about that choice, right? Because you made it. So I think, to summarize, as I said before, I want to be remembered as a journeyman and an adventurer that encouraged others to have choice. Does that make sense?
Oh, I love that. That is so aligned with mine, because my motto is all about how to live a more intentional life with no regrets. And intention means setting an intention and actually doing it, right? And that's like having a choice.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, no regret, meaning adventure, going out there, doing whatever you love. So thank you so much, Rohan. I really enjoyed our conversation today. I'll make sure to have all your details in the description below of the video. But once again, thank you for your contribution to EO, and thank you for speaking at Queensland. I look forward to seeing you in Sydney soon as well.
So do I, Lynn. And look, you're a credit to EO, and I've said that to you before, because you've got an amazing amount of energy, and if that's a reflection of EO Sydney, I can't wait to get down there.
Thank you so much.